when it came to the other defense attorneys speaking, Brian Steele was just very urging of the judge to please consider that Sean Combs had untreated trauma throughout his life. Brian Steele urged the judge to consider that Sean Combs had untreated trauma in his life, and that there have been times in Sean Combs' life, especially when he had in his system, that there were times where he had flatlined.
What if the most shocking part of Hollywood drama isn't what people are saying, but who is saying it and when they chose to speak? Because right now, the internet is in complete chaos. Jamie Foxx, a man who survived a life-threatening medical emergency, a brain bleed, a stroke that nearly took everything from him, is now being pulled straight into one of the most controversial conversations in entertainment history. And the name sitting at the center of it all? Sean "Diddy" Combs. But here's where things get uncomfortable. Because Diddy is not just facing rumors anymore, he is locked up in federal custody, cut off from the world, unable to respond freely, unable to defend himself in real time, and unable to control the narrative that is now exploding outside prison walls. Meanwhile, Foxx is on the outside, speaking, performing, joking, and hinting at things that fans are interpreting in 100 different ways. And that imbalance is exactly what's making this story go viral. One man has a voice, the other has silence. And in the world of public opinion, silence is never neutral. It gets filled with theories, with accusations, with old footage, with resurfaced interviews. And suddenly, a conversation that started as entertainment turns into something far more explosive. But here's the twist that nobody can ignore. Jamie Foxx has also previously denied the most serious claims in a direct, public setting. So now the internet is stuck asking the question nobody can comfortably answer. Is this a misunderstood situation being blown out of proportion by social media? Or is there a deeper story hiding behind years of Hollywood appearances, parties, and silence? Because once you step into this narrative, there's no simple exit. Only more questions, more contradictions, and a timeline that refuses to line up cleanly no matter how many times people try to explain it. And what happens next might change how people look at both men forever. The moment this story hits the timeline, everything escalates instantly. Clips start resurfacing. Old interviews get pulled out. Comedy's special moments get re-edited with dark music in the background. And suddenly, what looked like entertainment a year ago now feels like evidence to people watching it through a completely different lens. Because this isn't just about what was said recently. It's about everything that came before it. Jamie Foxx's name begins trending again, not because of a new movie, not because of a new stand-up set, but because of the way his past health crisis, his recovery, and his public appearances are now being connected, fairly or unfairly, to conversations he never fully controlled. At the same time, Sean "Diddy" Combs remains at the center of heavy legal and public scrutiny, with serious allegations and federal charges surrounding him, and the most important factor of all, he cannot freely respond in real time the way he used to. And that changes everything in the public eye. Because in today's internet culture, timing is everything. When someone speaks while another person is silent, the narrative automatically starts leaning toward whoever has the microphone. That's exactly what's happening here. But the deeper the story goes, the messier it becomes. Because Jamie Foxx is not a random outside observer in this world. He is someone who has been part of the same entertainment ecosystem, the same industry circles, the same Hollywood social environments that fans are now obsessively re-examining. Photos resurface. Event appearances get reanalyzed. Old jokes suddenly feel different depending on how people interpret them today. And that's where the internet does what it always does best. It builds a full story out of fragments. One clip becomes a timeline. One joke becomes a theory. One reaction becomes a confession in the eyes of viewers who are already convinced something bigger is going on. But here's where the situation takes a sharp turn. Because Jamie Foxx has also publicly addressed aspects of his health crisis before, and in those moments, he has described confusion, uncertainty, and even the medical mystery surrounding what exactly caused his collapse. That mystery has become fuel for speculation online. Not because there is confirmed evidence pointing in any specific direction, but because the internet hates unanswered questions more than it hates wrong answers. And when a situation has no official full explanation that satisfies everyone, people start filling in the blanks themselves. Meanwhile, in the background of all this, Diddy's legal situation continues moving through the court system. And that detail matters more than people realize. Because once someone is in a legal process, everything becomes filtered. Statements become limited. Responses become controlled. And silence becomes mandatory in ways the public often misunderstands. But online, silence is rarely interpreted as procedure. It is interpreted as guilt, avoidance, or strategy, depending on which side the audience already supports. So now you have two completely different realities colliding. On one side, a man who can speak freely, perform, joke, and shape how he is perceived. On the other side, a man who is legally restricted, unable to fully respond, and forced to let the public narrative develop without him. And the internet doesn't treat that imbalance fairly. It amplifies it. It exaggerates it. It turns it into a storyline. As the discussion grows, people begin pulling in past interviews, comedy clips, and viral moments involving both figures. Some viewers interpret Foxx's jokes as layered commentary. Others see them as harmless comedy being taken too seriously. Some believe there are hidden meanings in his phrasing. Others believe the entire situation is being blown out of proportion by algorithm-driven outrage cycles. And that's when the debate stops being about facts and starts becoming about interpretation. But interpretation is dangerous online, because once people start reading between the lines, they stop agreeing on what the lines even were in the first place. At the same time, social media creators begin packaging the situation into digestible narratives. Short clips, voiceovers, dramatic breakdowns, explainer videos that often add more emotion than clarity. And with each retelling, the story shifts slightly. Not always intentionally, but enough to matter. Enough to change tone. Enough to change perception. And that's how a complex, multi-layered situation turns into something that feels like a single, linear drama when it really isn't. Meanwhile, supporters of both sides push their own interpretations. Some say Foxx is being misunderstood, that comedy and storytelling are being taken out of context. Others say that public figures always know what they are doing when they speak in certain ways, especially when they choose timing carefully. And in the middle of all of it, the truth becomes harder and harder to separate from narrative. Because every piece of evidence online is also a piece of content. And content is designed to spread, not necessarily to clarify. That's the core problem driving this entire situation. The more attention it gets, the less clarity it produces. And the more unclear it becomes, the more attention it receives. A cycle with no natural ending. So now the internet is left sitting in a space where nothing feels fully confirmed, nothing feels fully denied, and everything feels open to interpretation. And in that space, stories grow the fastest. Not because they are proven, but because they are unfinished. And unfinished stories are what the internet loves most. And once a story becomes unfinished in the public eye, it never stays still. It evolves. It mutates. It picks up new angles, new interpretations, and new layers every single time someone re-uploads a clip or retells a moment with a slightly different tone. That's exactly what starts happening next. Because now the conversation is no longer just about Jamie Foxx or Diddy, or even the original context of what was said in interviews, specials, or appearances. It becomes about timing. And timing in the internet era is everything. People start asking why certain things are being said now instead of earlier. Why certain jokes resurfaced at this moment. Why certain interpretations suddenly feel louder than they did months ago. And why the narrative is shifting at the exact moment when one person is publicly visible and the other is legally restricted from responding freely. That imbalance becomes the center of the entire debate. Not necessarily the original claims, but the ability to respond to them. And in online culture, that alone can shape perception faster than any statement ever could. As discussions intensify, the internet begins doing what it always does in situations like this. It starts building a timeline. Not an official timeline, but a crowdsourced narrative timeline built from fragments. A clip here, a quote there, a resurfaced interview from years ago, a comedy moment taken out of its original context, a reaction video layered on top of another reaction video. And slowly, what started as scattered pieces becomes a structured story in the minds of viewers, even though nothing in that structure is fully confirmed. Meanwhile, commentary creators begin taking different positions. Some frame Jamie Foxx as someone speaking his truth after surviving a traumatic medical event, suggesting that his perspective comes from lived experience and emotional reflection. Others argue that public figures in Hollywood are always aware of how their words will be interpreted, especially when dealing with sensitive topics or controversial names. And then there's a third group, the largest group online, who don't fully commit to either side. They just observe. They analyze. They clip. They repost. They comment. Because in today's internet ecosystem, participation doesn't require a conclusion. You don't need to believe something fully to engage with it. You just need to find it interesting enough to share. And that alone keeps the cycle alive. At the same time, Diddy's situation remains a critical part of why the conversation carries so much weight. Because once someone is under federal legal pressure, every public discussion involving them becomes more sensitive, more restricted, and more heavily scrutinized. But the internet doesn't operate with those same boundaries. It operates on immediacy, speed, emotion, reaction. So while legal systems slow everything down, social media speeds everything up. And that clash creates distortion. Statements get misquoted. Old clips get reinterpreted. And silence gets assigned meaning it may or may not actually have. That's where the confusion grows. Because people begin treating lack of response as confirmation of something deeper, even when no official information supports that assumption. And at the same time, any public comment made by others connected to the situation gets dissected frame by frame. Tone matters. Facial expressions matter. Word choice matters. Even pauses get analyzed like evidence. In this environment, nothing is neutral anymore. Everything becomes symbolic. Even comedy. Especially comedy. Because humor is one of the hardest things to interpret online. What feels like a joke to one audience feels like a hidden message to another. What feels like storytelling to one group feels like a coded statement to another. And once that divide forms, it doesn't close easily. Instead, it expands. More creators enter the conversation. More breakdowns appear. More explained videos get uploaded. More clips get circulated with captions that change how they are perceived. And each layer adds a new interpretation on top of the last one. Until eventually, the original context becomes almost secondary to the narrative people have built around it. That's the key shift in this entire situation. It is no longer about what was actually said in one specific moment. It is about what people believe those moments represent. And representation is far more powerful than fact in viral culture, because facts require verification. Representation only requires emotion. So as the conversation spreads, two completely different versions of reality begin to form online. In one version, this is a misunderstanding, a case of jokes, timing, and internet speculation being taken too far. In another version, this is a deeper story about Hollywood circles, hidden dynamics, and selective storytelling depending on who has the ability to speak publicly. And both versions exist at the same time, on the same platforms, under the same videos, in the same comment sections. And neither side fully disappears. Instead, they compete for attention. But attention doesn't choose based on truth. It chooses based on engagement. And engagement always favors the more emotional version of the story, the more dramatic interpretation, the more controversial framing, which is why the situation keeps growing instead of settling. Even when new clarifications appear, they don't always reduce speculation. Sometimes they increase it, because clarification itself can be interpreted in multiple ways depending on who is watching. And that's where things become impossible to fully control. Once a narrative reaches that stage, it stops being owned by the people involved. It becomes collective property of the internet. And collective narratives don't move toward closure easily. They move toward expansion. So now the question shifts again. Not just what was said, not just when it was said, but why the internet is so determined to keep this conversation alive. And the answer is simple, even if uncomfortable, because unresolved stories hold attention longer than resolved ones. And in a world driven by attention, resolution is not the goal. Continuation is. And that's where the story stops being about one moment and starts becoming about the entire system around it. Because once a narrative reaches this level of visibility, the internet doesn't just follow it anymore. It feeds it. Every new clip becomes fuel. Every old interview becomes context. Every silence becomes interpretation. And every reaction becomes part of the storyline. So now, instead of a single clear conversation, you get something much more chaotic, a constantly shifting digital ecosystem where nobody fully agrees on what the center of the story even is. Some people still focus on Jamie Foxx, his health journey, his recovery, his return to public life, and the way his words are now being re-examined under a microscope they were never originally meant to survive. Others focus on Diddy, his legal situation, the restrictions on his ability to respond, and the broader public conversation around accountability, fame, and power in entertainment culture. And then there's the internet itself, which is no longer just observing. It's actively shaping how both sides are perceived. Because in today's world, perception spreads faster than explanation. And explanation rarely catches up. As this situation continues to circulate, something subtle starts happening in the background of the discussion. People begin shifting from asking what happened to asking what it means. And that shift is important, because what happened requires facts. But what it means allows interpretation. And interpretation is infinite. That's why the conversation never settles. It keeps branching into new directions. One video focuses on timing. Another focuses on body language. Another focuses on old clips. Another focuses on legal status. Another focuses on Hollywood history in general. And slowly, the original topic dissolves into a web of connected theories and parallel discussions. At that point, the story is no longer linear. It becomes layered. And layered stories are the hardest to close. Meanwhile, public reaction continues to split into multiple camps. One group believes this entire situation is a classic example of internet exaggeration, where clips are taken out of context, emotional reactions are amplified, and narratives are shaped more by engagement than by truth. Another group believes there is always something underneath, viral stories involving powerful figures, even if that something is distorted, misunderstood, or incomplete in the way it reaches the public. And a third group, arguably the most influential in terms of reach, doesn't fully commit to either side. They simply consume. They watch. They comment. They share. They debate. Because in the attention economy, engagement doesn't require certainty. It only requires curiosity. And curiosity is exactly what keeps this story alive. But there's another layer to this that people often overlook. The role of silence. Silence from one side. Silence from certain individuals. Silence from people who were present in those environments years ago. And in the absence of clear, unified statements, the internet does what it always does. It fills the silence with narrative. Sometimes accurate, sometimes exaggerated, sometimes completely speculative, but always active. And that activity becomes the engine of virality. Now, looking at Jamie Foxx specifically, his position in all of this remains complicated in the public eye, because he is both a survivor of a very real and serious medical emergency, and also a public figure whose words are now being interpreted in a wider cultural debate that goes far beyond his personal experience. And that overlap is where misunderstandings tend to grow. Because once personal experience enters public narrative, it is no longer interpreted privately. It is dissected publicly. Frame by frame, word by word, moment by moment. And that level of scrutiny can transform even simple statements into multi-layered debates. At the same time, Diddy's situation remains heavily defined by legal constraints and ongoing proceedings, which means his ability to engage in public discourse is fundamentally different from those speaking outside of that system. And that difference creates imbalance. And imbalance creates perception gaps. And perception gaps are exactly where internet narratives thrive. Because the less equal the communication flow is, the more room there is for speculation. And speculation, once it reaches critical mass, becomes self-sustaining. It no longer needs confirmation to survive. It only needs attention. So now, what you're left with is not a closed story, but an open loop. A cycle that continues repeating every time a clip resurfaces, every time a new commentary video drops, and every time audiences rediscover older material through a new emotional lens. And in that loop, clarity becomes secondary. What matters most is engagement, reaction, interpretation, and participation. Which brings everything back to the core reality of modern viral culture. Stories like this don't end because they are solved. They end because people stop talking about them. And right now, people are still talking. So the story continues. Not because there is new proof. Not because there is final confirmation. But because the structure of the internet rewards continuation over conclusion. And as long as that structure exists, any unresolved narrative can come back at any time. Re-edit, re-uploaded, re-explained, and reignited. Which leaves one final question hanging in the air. Are people watching the truth unfold in real time, or are they watching a never-ending cycle of interpretation that keeps reshaping itself with every new viewer? Because depending on who you ask, the answer will always change. And maybe that is the real ending here. Not closure, not confirmation, but the realization that in the modern digital world, some stories are not meant to end. They are only meant to evolve. And this one is still evolving. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think the internet is actually uncovering real hidden truths when stories like this go viral? Or is it just turning fragments into full narratives that look bigger than they actually are? Because one thing is clear, once a story reaches this level, there is no going back to simple. It either becomes accepted truth, or it becomes endless debate. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more deep dive breakdowns like this, where viral clips, celebrity culture, and internet narratives collide, make sure you stay tuned. Because the next story is always already loading, even before this one ends.